So Ajit Pai is the head of the FCC. Now, the FCC had, of course, repealed net neutrality protections. And look, the public comment period has come under a lot of scrutiny because during that time, there were millions of comments that were copy-paste that were coming from some very dubious sources. So now the New York Times decided to look into this and to see where some of these fake accounts were coming from and whether or not they were coming from Russia. So now there's this thing where if something weird happens, a lot of the media tends to be like, well, maybe it's Russian. Now, I don't necessarily believe that. Nonetheless, I think that this is actually a good idea to look into it, to look into this FOIA request, because somebody was making these fake comments that were drowning out legitimate voices in the comment period for net neutrality. Now, the Times did make this Freedom of Information Act request back in June of 2017 for the FCC server logs. And they also took the FCC to court in September over the agency's refusal to release those records. Now, the court case hasn't gone anywhere. It's still pending. However, the Times had appealed directly to the FCC to reverse its FOIA decision. The new news on this is that on Monday, they had denied that appeal. Now, the Times FOIA request was for the server logs related to the system for accepting public comments on the FCC's repeal of net neutrality, right? Now, the Times, as I said before, was looking into Russian involvement. A similar request was made by BuzzFeed, and of course, the FCC had rejected both of them. That is very curious. Again, I'm skeptical that it's the Russians, but I think it's far more likely that the paid bots and trolls were actually created by the industry itself in order to make sure that the industry gets their net neutrality repeal. And because that would mean millions of dollars in profit for these companies. So like, yeah, of course, we'll go and create these bots and trolls and we'll inundate this to make it seem as if net neutrality is very unpopular and that Ajit Pai's repeal represents the will of the people, which is horse crap. Even a majority of Republicans, a large majority of Republicans, are in favor of net neutrality rules. Why? It's because it keeps the internet free, open, and competitive, instead of allowing the ISPs to essentially be gatekeepers that if you do not pay them a ransom, will either slow down your internet or speed everyone else's up so that you can't remain competitive. They're basically trying to act as highwaymen to the information superhighway. That's not what Republican business owners want. It's not what a lot of corporations want. That's why you had some of the biggest names on the pro-net neutrality side be companies like Google, which, of course, as I said, has a financial incentive. Netflix, Mozilla, a lot of these tech companies are in favor of net neutrality because they grew up on the internet. And having that free and open internet space where all content is treated equally, and when it comes to speed at least, and access, well, look, that was an important reason that these companies were able to get as large as they were and to be as successful as they were. Without that, a lot of companies might not have made it. But anyway, now one of the commissioners, the only Democratic commissioner left, Jessica Rosenworcel, basically was the only one to dissent as well. The rest are Republicans on the board because you had all the Democrats essentially resign in protest. Now, Rosenworcel basically asked, what is the Federal Communications Commission hiding? And she pointed out the widespread fraud in the net neutrality proceedings, saying that as many as 9.5 million people had their identities stolen and used to file fake comments. That is a crime under both federal and state laws. She said, quote, "Something here is rotten, and it's time for the FCC to come clean. Regrettably, this agency will not do this on its own, so it falls to those who seek to investigate it from outside its walls." And of course, the New York Times, BuzzFeed, and these outlets should get a lot of credit for trying to do that. Even if they're trying to come at it from maybe it's the Russians angle, I think it's still important to look into this and to see who actually created these comments. I don't think you're going to be surprised if you find that it's a lot of telecom communications companies that are you know, putting up these bots and trolls so that they can, or, well, they were successful. They did that so they could be successful at killing net neutrality rules. Now, part of the reason, of course, they want to do that is money and from paid prioritization, right? Now, Pi and other Republicans won't allow investigators to look at the servers. Now, the thing about that is that suggests to me that he either already knows that to be the case, that it's nothing more than industry, or suspects that it is industry and doesn't want to do anything about it because it would get in the way of their profit margin. After all, Pi was a Verizon lobbyist, and all these Republican politicians on the FCC are paid by these telecommunications companies. That's why they don't want people looking at the logs. They'll find out, I think, that the will of the people on net neutrality, which is fairly clear in all the different polls leading up to the net neutrality vote, that basically these people were drowned out by nothing more than bots and trolls, the regular people who believe in net neutrality. And at the end of the day, the question is, well, what are they afraid of? The answer is democracy and the will of the people. Hey guys, hopefully you enjoyed that free video. Now I'm going to have to ask you a favor. Between the demonetization and the YouTube algorithm messing around with view counts, etc., we're having a hard time adjusting to the new YouTube reality, which is where you guys come in. See, we have a Patreon, patreon.com/TYTNation, set up to help us rely on you guys, the viewers, instead of big corporate ads. Look, you know the show. You know I'm not in favor of big corporations anyway. So help us transition away from relying on the ad model to pay the bills and sign up to be a patron, patreon.com/TYTNation. That goes a long way to help us keep the lights on. And you guys will know that you're supporting independent, progressive media.